When Apple decided to do away with the mini smartphones in their lineups, it did cause quite a bit of a stir. Now, as somebody who has been trying to use smaller smartphones more often over the last number of months, I can appreciate the fact that we want to have higher powered specifications in as small of a design as possible. Well, that's definitely not what happened when Apple decided to bring back the Plus line. And I know there are plenty of people out there who definitely still want to have the smallest smartphone possible, but still have a lot of the power that you would want underneath. So what exactly happens when the Mini ends up going Plus? Does Apple lose all of those particular fans who really adored the iPhone 13 Mini? Are they actually going to move over to like the iPhone 14 Plus, or just stick to the smallest of the bunch, the iPhone 14? Well, one thing that I kind of noticed in using the iPhone 14 Plus is that perhaps it might be able to actually capture a whole new group of people, a different type of demographic who actually want to have as much screen as possible for a few of the benefits that might provide. Maybe simply put, these are the types of users who want the most on the outside, even if they are willing to compromise on some of the stuff that is on the inside. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Here are my thoughts on the iPhone 14 Plus. I have used it for a little while now, and a little bit later in the video, we will have a bit of a tea break where I'm going to introduce you to the sponsor of this video, Airolo, but we'll get to that in a second. Obviously, when it comes to the iPhone 14 Plus, what we have here is a phone that is large and in charge. Now, given the many different bigger phones that are available in the market today, this actually doesn't make the iPhone 14 Plus particularly unique in the market. I will be right there alongside a lot of you who lament the loss of the mini smartphones. Those were actually unique smartphones because of their size, and even though it wasn't going to have like the best battery life, it had a lot of the same specifications from the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 13 mini that made it a really good phone to have every day, even if you had to plug it in more often than not. However, just like with the iPhone 13 mini, when you come over to the iPhone 14 Plus, you might end up having some compromises, and you know what? Some of them are actually pretty fair. You get this really large screen, and it gives you just a lot of room to enjoy, read, play, or watch anything, but of course, with a larger screen means a larger body that you have to perform a lot more hand gymnastics for. But I do have to give the iPhone 14 Plus some props because it's actually really light. When you take a look at this phone, you would expect it to be a little bit heavier, but that's just not the case here. It might require some hand gymnastics to just get around with one-handed usage, but it's actually not too hard to do because it's very nimble. So I have to give it some props for that at least. Seriously, it's like delightfully light, making it an easy-to-use phone in its own right, even if the footprint is a lot larger. Now, I do have it in this Starlight colorway, and while a case might add a little bit more bulk, the fact that the phone is light means that it's not going to add too much heft. Now, as we get over to just enjoying the screen, there is one thing to keep in mind. With the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Plus, oops, I zoomed in a little bit too far, you do still get this notch, the classic notch that was actually replaced in the Pro models with the dynamic island. Now, hate the notch or not, it has returned. And while there are all of the Face ID things that are inside of the notch, that makes it a little bit useful, I suppose, that is something you're going to have to consider. But the fact that the screen is so large means that the notch isn't actually cutting into too much of the screen, and there's still plenty of it for you to enjoy. But you know what, aside from the size, really there's not anything out of the ordinary here when it comes to the iPhone 14 Plus. This literally just looks like an iPhone. And because it is a larger device, it actually falls in line with a lot of the phones that we are getting and have been getting for quite some time now. There is one thing in terms of the design aspect that you might notice here, and we've talked about it a lot already. There is no SIM slot. So that means it's going to be eSIM all the time. Well, there you go, the timer has gone off and the tea is done steeping, so we're going to go ahead and have our tea break for this video. For my videos moving forward, I'm going to go ahead and steep some tea so you can join me while drinking it, and when we have the tea break, I just want to be able to talk to all of you. So let me know how you are doing in the comment sections down below. I hope you're all doing well, and if you happen to have the iPhone 14 Plus, let me know what your experience has been like so far. For this tea break, however, I'm going to go ahead and pop it over to the sponsor of this video, Airolo, and I'll let you know how their service might actually really help you with these new eSIM-only iPhones, whether it's the iPhone 14 Plus or any of the others. This video is sponsored by Airolo, a great way to stay connected when traveling abroad thanks to a catalog of eSIMs that work in supported countries and regions, and Airolo keeps increasing text and call services across the world. Data roaming can be a huge added cost on your travel plans, and fiddling with physical SIMs can be a bit of a chore. If your local carrier is charging you an arm and a leg just to stay connected in another country, that's where Airolo's eSIM offerings can be a big help. With eSIMs that span across 200 plus countries and regions, you can keep the same connectivity that you enjoy at home whenever you go abroad. And if the new eSIM capabilities are a little daunting for you, Airalo makes it easy. Simply get the app and select what country or region you will be in. There are also global and regional eSIMs that you can install if you are visiting multiple countries. The eSIMs will then download into your phone and be at the ready once you arrive in your destination. And since the iPhone 14 Plus is able to hold multiple eSIMs, it'll be ready when you get there and then when you get back. Best of all, the connectivity of Airalo allows you to continue receiving calls and texts from your original number wherever you are. Now, let me tell you, when the new iPhone 14 lineup was announced, I was really worried about what moving completely to eSIM would do for people like constant travelers, especially those who might not even know how to work eSIMs in the first place. But Airalo reached out real quick to ensure me, and all of you, that they have your back. Just make sure you're all set up in the app before you go, and then you'll be ready wherever you are. Check out Airalo via the link in the description below and get yourself connected not just on the iPhone 14 Plus, but on a long list of smartphones that support eSIM. Sign up for Airalo and get yourself eSIM ready, whether at home or away. And thanks again to Airalo for sponsoring this video. So let's come back to the display. This is a 6.7-inch Retina display. It is the same size as the iPhone 14 Pro Max's display, but it actually is losing a couple of the features. One of the main things you're going to be missing is ProMotion. So there's not going to be a high refresh rate on here, which might sully the experience in some, let's say, games, for example. But overall, 60 Hz is going to be good for like the vast majority of things that you might do on this screen. Personally, I would love to have a higher refresh rate just to make everything move a little bit smoother, or at least, to my perception. The other main thing that's missing is the always-on display, which is a bit of a bummer because with a screen that is this gorgeous, well, you're not able to take advantage of it even when you're not using the phone the way that you could with the Pro models. It's just a bit of a shame because the always-on display actually breathed a little bit of new life into iOS from a usability and also just from like an aesthetic standpoint. And this is a gorgeous display that's here on the iPhone 14 Plus still. It's just that when you do put it away, it's just a blank slate like that. So like I was saying before, maybe fans of the iPhone 13 mini are going to lose out on some of the conveniences that they had with that smaller smartphone, but when it comes to the iPhone 14 Plus, perhaps Apple is kind of looking elsewhere for a new user base. In this case, I'm talking about people that might be our elders, or let's say anybody with less than, probably much less than 20/20 vision. So really we might all know at least one person who does this with any phone that they have, no matter what size it might be. If we head over to display and text size, maybe we can bold the text to make it a little bit easier that way, or we can actually go into the accessibility and make it much larger like this. I think we all know at least one person who looks at their phone with this amount of screen scaling. What's nice though is that because the screen of the iPhone 14 Plus is so large, you can actually fit a little bit more on this display even when the text is blown up like this. And of course those people could end up going to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I mean, it is the same size as the iPhone 14 Plus, but maybe they don't need to pay all of that money for a bunch of features that they may not actually use. If you're just looking for a large screen to be able to take advantage of accessibility features kind of like this, well, the iPhone 14 Plus kind of hits that sweet spot. As I said earlier in the video, it's all about compromises, and the trade-offs that the iPhone 14 Plus is providing seem to be making this, in its own way, just as comfortable a phone as the iPhone 13 mini might have been in its own way. But since we are talking about compromises, there are a couple of things that we have to mention, especially if you're considering the iPhone 14 Plus compared to the Pro models. The main thing being that the processor is the Bionic A15 instead of the Bionic A16. But this is still the same processor that came from the iPhone 13 Pro models, and it actually has gotten a little bit of a bump in terms of performance, so you are getting a slight update even if it doesn't sound like it in terms of the generation. The Bionic A15 is still more than enough for most tasks, pretty much everything really. You'll still be able to play things like Genshin Impact or any other game in the App Store, and it'll still be able to handle multitasking and everything just fine. And then the last thing that has to be considered is the fact that these cameras are the same as the iPhone 13 Pro minus a zoom lens. You're getting ultimately the same camera experience, you just won't be able to zoom in a whole lot. You still get all the same processing power, but just without certain pro features. Things like shooting in ProRAW or ProRes. The megapixel count is 12 megapixels for both the main and the wide angle cameras. And finally, to top it all off, action mode is actually on here in case you do want to like run around with the phone. But if it is a larger phone and you have a problem keeping a grip on it, just make sure you don't drop it when you're running in that action mode. And there is one other thing that I actually found a bit of a convenience when it came to this larger screen, the fact that the viewfinder ends up being that much bigger as well. There's no reason to think that any typical user, those who are not, let's say, prosumers, are going to feel lacking when it comes to the iPhone 14 Plus. Plus. If you're just looking for a decent, reliable, but still large and in charge type of smartphone, well, the iPhone 14 Plus does check a lot of those boxes, if not all of them. Unless you want to be able to zoom in your photos and videos, though. How did I not think of that? So the iPhone 14 Plus is the iPhone 14 just blown up, to the size of the iPhone 14 Pro Max, but omitting certain things that make it Pro and make it Max. But that's fine, because for people who just want to save a little bit of money, you will be able to get a lot of phone without having to pay for certain things that you may or may not end up using. I mean, it's still an iPhone 14, and it has all of the updates that Apple brought to the entire 14 lineup. Things like updated connectivity, including connections to satellites for emergency situations. Speaking of safety features, crash detection is on here as well. The phone also has wireless charging, and you know what? The battery life on here is actually pretty fantastic. At around 4,300 milliamp hours, that battery capacity actually makes the iPhone 14 Plus a beast when it comes to getting through just full-on typical days, even with a little bit heavier usage with things like YouTube viewing and playing some games here and there. So as the smartphone in the iPhone 14 lineup that might be considered a bit of an oddball, the question remains, does the iPhone 14 Plus deserve your consideration? I would say yes, it does deserve your consideration, just not in the same ways that the iPhone 13 mini did. See, in shifting this particular smartphone in the lineup over to a larger size, they are still providing some conveniences just in a different way. And for those people in our lives, let's say our elders or anyone with less than good vision, they would be able to benefit from the larger screen and the accessibility features that are found within. And I think that's a pretty cool thing for them to consider and to provide for those types of users. What we have here in the iPhone 14 Plus is basically an iPhone 14 Pro Max type experience with some compromises made, but you still get the same size, and there are a lot of people out there who can benefit from having a larger screen, or might just desire it in general, but they don't want to pay the Pro Max price. I mean, just speaking personally, I have found myself requiring less and less from my daily drivers. I have actually gravitated to smaller smartphones or smartphones that don't have the best or the greatest specifications, mainly because I just enjoy the usability of it. So when it comes to the iPhone 14 Plus, I think it strikes a pretty interesting balance. It is a larger phone, but it does provide that large screen that does make it an enjoyable everyday use. And then it's actually pretty light. So even if I might be a little bit wary of the footprint, at least actually using the phone every day is not too bad. And in that interesting balance, you might have a phone here that might make perfect sense for you or anyone in your life, particularly suited to its game of give and take. And so there you have it, the iPhone 14 Plus. Just wanted to give some thoughts on it, and this is also a slightly new format for me here on the channel. I'm just writing down some notes and kind of talking off the cuff so that I can keep things even more casual and hopefully even more consistent. I'm also going to be making tea at the beginning of most of my videos from now on, and when that tea is ready, we can actually take a break together, talk together, and I can get to know some of you, my audience, and you let me know how you are in the comment sections down below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, where I hope you come for the tech, but you stay for the tea. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you again. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.